Welcome back to Coding Adventure. You can see we have our animal simulator running perfectly fine here. And the next step that we have to do, we're going to pick back up where we left off, is I really want to break out the logic of running the animals' lives out from the console display of them. We really should encapsulate, keyword there, the functionality of stepping through every 50 milliseconds and living a frame of their life in a separate class than where the UI is being handled. Because as you can see, the simulation is being directly tied to how fast we're updating the console. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a new class for this purpose, and we'll just call it an animal simulator. And the idea is that we're going to encapsulate this in its own component, which means that you could have a number of animal simulators if you want to. So we're going to create animal simulator, like so, except I need the word class, like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of the shit type and put it in animal simulator with the exception of the main program and show messages, both of which are console-based logic. And that's going to go back in there. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an instance of animal simulator called sim, which is what these are going to reference. Now there's still going to be errors because I need to make these public and I need to make them not static. But you can see here how relatively easy that was. And now I'm just going to go down here, and instead of making these static, I'm going to make these all public. Except the event handlers. The event handlers do not need to be public. And what is the issue here? I mean, animal could not be found. What the fuck is that shit? What you talking about? What you talking about? What the fuck happened here? That's interesting. We put our class outside of the namespace. Alright, next thing. Inconsistency less accessible than excuse me? Excuse me? What? 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 So the next problem is that I made this class public. And animals are not public, so we need to make animals public because I want to expose them outside of our class. Let's see, what the next problem is that this needs to be static. And here, excuse me, these need to be, wait, what the fuck am I talking about? These should not be static, is the issue here. These are event handlers, and there we go. And now if we run it, everything should be hunky-dory. Business as usual. The difference is that now our main program is doing nothing more than creating a simulator, creating the initial 6 animals in the simulator, and then looping through the simulator while we display our stuff. Now the problem is that we're still calling the live inside the simulator, and what we should really be doing is the simulator should be doing the living on its own. So really, instead of having this here, what should actually happen is that the simulator should do its own stepping. Now if we just run this as it is, you'll just see that they all just stay there and don't move. So we need to have another thread that's within the simulator. So we're going to create a private thread, simu thread, and in our constructor, which we'll make, we will create the new thread, and we will reference a function that we will have, and that will allow us to run the simulator. And in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to step through the animals and live them all, and then sleep for 50 milliseconds, which is the same measure that we were doing before. But we're going to do a couple features here. First of all, we need to create a function to start the simulator, because our thread has not been started. So what we want to do here is we want to say simuthread.start. And perhaps we should also check to see if it's already started. So we can check the state of the thread, and we can see if it's running, or really what we want to see is whether it's running or not. We can simply do that. Now, we can also create a run rate integer and replace this so that this is not hard-coded. And then we can create a public property. We'll call it speed, to return the run rate. God damn it. And set the run rate. Like that. And then up in our main, we'll simply say simulator speed is 50, simulator start. And let's see what happens. And nothing appears to be happening. So let's trace it out and see what's going on. Let's start here. So we set the simulator speed, and then we run start. From within start, we do that, and then we run the start thread. This exits out and starts creating new animals, which is fine. But somewhere along the way, there is a thread, perhaps here. Not that one. Not that one. It's not that one. Not that one. Maybe there isn't a thread. So we set that to do run, and then run is doing this. Oh, well that would be our issue. This has exited. We need that to occur more than once. So let's go ahead and rerun that. And turn off the breakpoint. And as you can see, our thing works beautifully. Now, until now. So now we have an issue with the synchronization of the animals. So now let's do something different. Let's just do a lock on the animals, because we did lock around every other place where we changed the animals. So we should be able to do that. And let's see if that resolves the issue. Because what should be happening here, which apparently is not happening, is that this has been modified. The reason why this is not working is because I guarantee that the call that we're making that removes the animals is as a result of live. So we can simply do our old parlor trick of creating a copy of the list. And this will, for all intents and purposes, resolve the issue. I can't change that while the thing is running, and I need to create a new one, not just that. But this should fix the issue now, because now we are operating solely on a copy of a list. The problem, however, is that we're making a copy of a list every 50 milliseconds, which could be detrimental. It might not be. It all depends on the garbage collector. And we will look how to check on that in a second. So this seems to be running pretty fine. Now here's one thing that we couldn't do before, is we can change the speed. Now before we change the speed, one thing I want to do is I want to have a flag called stop flag. And I want to have a public function called stop. And what this will do is this will say stop flag equals true. And instead of while true here, we will say while not stop flag. And then afterwards we will set that back to false, so that it could be used again. And what this does is we now expose a function to stop the simulation, and what that does is this sets this to true, and what that will do is when this is done simulating the current cycle, this will no longer apply, and this will exit out, and then we'll set it back to false so that it could be started again without it immediately stopping. So that is what we're going to do, and we're going to go up to our main program and make some controls now. We're going to make some controls. So the first thing is that we can, if we want to, put the console.readline inside of the loop. And what that does is it makes it so that I have to hit enter to step through. But the simulation is still running in the background. Notice if I wait a really long time and hit enter, a lot of things have happened in that amount of time. The simulation is still going on. So this actually gives me the ability to step through it. So we're going to create some more controls functionality around that. So what I'm actually going to do here is we're going to create some variables. I'm going to say bool console, not the word console, that's unuseful. We'll use the word bool prompt. Prompt. How about the word play? Alright, that works. What is this error? It's assigned its value, but it's never been used. Didn't I have that turned off? Anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if prompt, then console.readline. What we'll do is we'll say if x is p, then prompt is false, and then that will allow us to play the thing normally, except that I have that set to false by default. So I have no way to get into it yet. So now we can step through it if we want to, or I can hit P and hit enter to have it play. Now I want to find a way to break out of this, and that's going to be harder because I can't do a read line because then it won't resume until I press enter. So let's experiment with a couple things here. Alright, I've gone ahead and solved that issue, so I'm going to change this back to false here. And what I've done is, if we're not prompting, then what we're doing is we're looking to see if there's a key available. And what that does is that checks to see if someone's pressed a key prior to doing the blocking read key operation. If I just did a read key, it would be very similar to read line, and the program would just wait until someone pressed a key. But because I'm checking only if key is available, it's only checking if someone pressed a key. So when I play this, you'll see that if I press any key other than P, there's barely any feedback. But if I hit P, it then stops and goes into the prompt. And now I can type commands into it, hit enter to step through it, or hit P enter to go back into the play mode. So you can see that this is becoming really powerful. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create some commands to change the speed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change this up and say, if not x is, if not string is null or empty x, so in other words, someone typed something at the prompt, then call command x, and then we'll break this out into a separate function to deal with the actual commands. So we'll do a, honestly, this could be private static void call command. Yes, I know I spelled that wrong. Private. Alright, and then what I want to do here is I want to break the command up into its components. So what we can do is we can say, if, first of all, if command is null, then we just want to return, because that's not going to help anyone. But what we can do is we can say if command.contains a space, and let's see if this requires a character or a string. It should get implicitly converted, but I don't want to make the assumption. It looks like it takes a string, so we'll give it a string with a space. And we'll say that if the command contains a space, then what we'll do is we'll say int io equals command index of space. Does that want to, that actually wants a char. So we'll look for the space, and then basically what we'll do is we'll say if command.length is greater than, well actually if io is greater than -1 and command.length is greater than io plus 1, then that means that we have a command separated by a parameter with a space. We can say that parameter equals command.substring io plus 1, and command equals command.substring 0 io, and we should now have a parameter and a command. And we'll test this out right here. I may have gotten the math slightly wrong. And we'll see what that does us for. Oh, what's wrong? It needs to sign, fuck you. It's one of the reasons I hate C#. Alright, so we'll break the program here, and I'll type in hi there. And, well, that's an issue because it's going to clear again, so let's add another console read line. And we'll break into it here, and I'll say hi there. And there we go, hi and there. And if I do hi there 234, you can see that, oops, hi there 234, you can see that that correctly gets parsed out. And for example, if I do booyah and I add a bunch of extra spaces, that is part of the parameter. We're not trimming that, but we can easily trim the parameter. And the way that we would trim the parameter is by saying down here, if not string is null or empty parameter, then parameter equals parameter.trim, because it could still be null at this point. And there's no point in trimming it if it's empty either, so that will solve that problem. Now we can do a switch case on the command. And what this allows us to do is have all kinds of beautiful things. So if the case is p, we can say, oh shit, we've lost access to our play command, our play variable. So our prompt variable. So what I want to do is I want to be able to say prompt equals false here. But obviously we don't have access to prompt. And what the hell is the problem here? Cannot follow the yeah, okay, I'm sorry that I didn't break this yet. But there. Now the problem is that prompt is in another context, so we have to figure out how we want to pass that in. I could ask for it to be passed in as an argument, or I could make it global. Honestly, in this case, it's very private to the logic of the way that the main loop runs, so I probably wouldn't want to make it a global, public, or even protected field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this in as a parameter. Now, if I just do this the normal way that you're used to, and I just say boolean prompt, this isn't going to work. And let's go ahead and try it out. If I break into the prompt and then I hit P and enter, you'll notice that nothing happens. It doesn't play again. And the reason for that is because we're setting it here. In fact, I'll show you that we're setting it. I'll break into it, I'll hit P, and you can see here that we've broken into it. And right now prompt is true. And if I go ahead and break, if I run it, now prompt is false. But when control goes back here, you'll notice, and I do need to get rid of that read line, you'll notice that here, prompt is still true. And the reason for that is because when we pass value types, which are fundamental types such as integer, long, double, any of the numeric types, boolean, and also, I believe, structures, so date time, for example, they will automatically pass by value, which means that they get copied. There's not a pointer to them. So what that means is that here I'm actually going to have to go and say ref bool prompt. And what that's going to do now is it's going to now pass it in by reference, and when I do change it, it will change in the original function. Except now there's a whole fucking problem, because over here I now have to tell it that that is being passed by reference explicitly, because as the caller, I need to make sure that I understand the implications that my variables might be changed by this function I'm calling. So I'm going to hit P and hit enter, and you can see it plays again. I had to hit enter twice because I forgot to get rid of this extra read line that I put in here when I was checking the parameter in the command. Alright, so that's gone. So now at this point we have a nice, beautiful command engine, and I'm going to go ahead and put S in here for speed. And I'm going to say, okay, well, at this point, we just want to set the speed of the simulator. So simulator.speed equals, and we have to parse the parameter. So I'm going to say integer 32.parse. And that's going to be param, and break. And we have to break out of the case, because you either have to break or let it fall through. Like this one I could let fall through, and if I hit P, it would actually prompt and do that, but we have to break out here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit P, then I'm going to hit S, and I'm going to hit, instead of 50, I'm going to hit 100. And then I'm going to play, and you can see here that it's going a little bit slower, well, twice as slow as it was before. And I'm going to go ahead and do it again. I'm going to hit P to break out, and hit S200, play. And you can see here exactly what's going on. Now let's do it we'll do it one more time, S1000. So this means that it will pause 1 second between running the loop of life decrementation. And this is not just the update that's displaying, this is the thread on the backside. You can see the screen flashing. The screen is still updating at 50 milliseconds, which would be, what, 50 into 200 hertz? It's updating at 200 hertz, 20 hertz? I don't know, a second math, but let's go ahead and break in here, set the speed to, let's set it to 25, which is twice as fast as it normally is. And you can see there that even though the screen's only updating at 50 milliseconds, the counters are going ridiculously fast. And we can actually go ahead and in the background, let's pause it, and just say, how about 10 instead? And we'll break out of there. And now everything's going pretty crazy, and, you know, the stuff is scrolling off the screen faster than, you know, it's becoming an issue to update the screen at this point. So maybe this shouldn't be a console application in the first place. But now that we've broken our business logic out from the thing displaying it, we can actually make that determination. And now that we have the ability to control this, we can change the interface a bit. So let's go ahead and break out of this shit. And the next thing that I'm going to do here is, let's zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and collapse what we have here so that we can see what we have in our program. Alright. So we have these, let's make these public for... Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull over my Solution Explorer so you can see it. And I'm going to go ahead and inside my solution, I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to create a Windows application. And just for kicks, let's do it in Visual Basic, VB.NET, which is a completely different language that I don't expect you to know. I didn't expect you to know the other one in the first place, but let's go ahead and create a Windows Forms application, and we'll call it SimUI. And that will go ahead and create that. And inside our application, I'm going to say that I need a reference. So we're going to go to Add Reference, and I want a reference to Tutorial 1. And what this does is this creates a reference to our simulator class that's within our exe assembly. References are to things called assemblies. In .NET, all of the code is broken down into components or libraries that that contain one or more assemblies. An assembly is the atomic unit of interoperability between pieces of .NET code and components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and within my form here, I'm going to go ahead and view the code. So let's go to View Code. And this is what a class looks like in VB. Very similar to C#, except instead of braces, it's end class. And within here, I'm going to import some namespaces. So in C# we used using up here with namespaces. Up here, I'm going to use imports. And you can see that I have my Assy Swizzle Cheeks namespace here. And inside my Assy Swizzle Cheeks, you can see that I have all of the stuff that I made public before. So up here in my form 1, I'm going to create a new simulator. Sim as new animal simulator. And you can see that that is there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some stuff on my UI here. So for example, I'm going to create, where's my toolbox? Here's my toolbox over here. I'm going to create a list view. And I'm going to create a button. I'm going to create another button. And this one's going to be called, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Bear with me. This one's going to be called Start. This one's going to be called Stop. And we will name this list view Animal View, and we will call this Start Button. I know you can't see this, but trust me, I'm renaming these. And this one will be called Stop Button. And we will also create a timer. And I will actually do that in code, because timer doesn't need to be created in the visual editor. So I'm going to go back into my form here, and I'm going to get rid of this handler. And when my form loads, I'm going to start the simulator. I'm actually going to set the initial speed, because it's a good idea to not rely on the default that's inside the class, because they could update that component. You know, let's say the animal simulator was created by a different company than the UI, and they decide to change the default speed. We don't want the behavior changing in our application in a subsequent update. So I'll go ahead and set the initial speed. And then the other thing that we can do is we can change the view on the form, so we can say animal view dot view equals details. And you'll notice that in VB there's no semicolons, and you'll notice that well, technically it's case insensitive, so I could type animal view in all lowercase and it's the same exact thing, but it doesn't really matter because just like C#, it automatically fixes the capitalization no matter what. So honestly, case sensitivity isn't really a thing in either one of them because as long as Visual Studio is updating it to however you've defined it, it doesn't really matter. In C#, it's a pain in the ass because if you type out something and then you go ahead and define it after the fact with different capitalization, you have to go back and fix it before it will run. VB, it will just automatically update it because it's not a pain in the ass, but I can see how it's nice to be able to have an uppercase and a lowercase version of the same thing. Anyway, then we're going to put in the handler for our start button, and that's basically going to be sim.start. And in here, we're going to say sim.stop. And we made those available. And then what we want to do is we want to create a timer. So up here, I'm going to say public timer as new timer. And we can specify, I don't really care what we're specifying here, so we're just going to create a new timer. And up here, I'm going to say timer.interval. And we want to update the screen every, let's say, 100 milliseconds. And when we start our sim, we will also start our timer. When we stop our sim, we can also stop our timer because there's no point in running because nothing's going to update. And then we need a handler for our timers events. So what I can actually do is the timer's not going to show up here because I didn't create it on the form, but I'm going to say with events, which is something you can do in VB, and that will actually add it to this list up here. So now I can just say timer tick without having to type all that in. And then when our timer ticks, we want to update the display of the animal. So let's say for each A as animal in sim.animals. And don't forget that we have to actually make a copy of the list here or else it's going to get modified. So let's say in new list of sim animals. New list of sim animals. So in C# we did list and then we used these. You'll notice that actually every time I hit this key it actually puts of there. We did that in, oh my god, VB and its features. That is what we did in C#, but in VB it's a list of animal, like that. Anyway. So we make a copy of that. And then what we do here is, in this particular case, this is not going to be the most efficient way to do this, but we're just going to copy what we're doing on the console app, which is basically clearing it, and in this case we have to clear the items, and then adding a new item for every animal. And we basically call it toString with our statistics here, so show statistics here. So notice how even though pretend I'm a different coder using a different language, using a different application, you can see how it's important that all of my metadata is in place. My toString has been overridden because that's where any coder is going to expect it to be. It's public, so I can access it from this assembly. Show statistics is named properly, so I can see as someone using this class that, what that actually does. And it's a Boolean, so I'm going to put in true there, and my IntelliSense knows that it can either be true or false, and I get a nice little menu. And then that's it. And then let's run this and see what happens. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work on the first try. Oh my god, we need to set the other application to start. So we're going to say SimUI is our startup project. All right, now let's run this and hit start. And nothing has happened. Oh, now we have a problem. That's because I hit it more than once. So you'll notice that we've actually broken out into in here. So thread is running or terminated, cannot restart. Ooh. Okay, so the problem is that we have no more animals. We didn't create any animals, so that's actually the problem. But while we're here, we can fix the problem that we have in C#, which is that the thread is actually terminated and we can't restart it. So honestly, one thing that we can do here is we can say if thread is running and let's just change this to a case. So here's what I was telling you before about breaks. This is much better if we just say switch on the thread state, and then I can say case thread state dot aborted case thread state dot stopped case thread state. Basically anything that's not what we want, or unstarted. In these two cases, what we should be doing is creating new threads. So let's say the sign new thread equals a new thread run, and then starting it. Actually, I wonder if it's going to bitch if I do this. Because honestly, that is what I would do in C++. Why is this an issue? Control cannot fall through from one case label to another. Why not? Why is that not? Can I do this then? Can I do this like in VB where I say thread state dot stopped, and that's a single statement? No. What if I break it? Why is that not valid? Are you fucking serious? I have to actually have... Why is that valid? Why is this valid and the thing before it wasn't valid? And why is this break invalid? Oh, because there's nothing there. Okay, so this doesn't make any sense now. So, right, and, I don't get it, thread. The only difference is they're in alphabetical order now. Thread state unstarted. Thread dot start. Break. But that's not what I wanted. I want that to happen. See, it won't let that happen. Apparently it'll let that happen, but it won't let anything else happen. Which is horrible, which means that I need to start this separately. Anyway, that's not even an issue. Anyway, and then anything else, we don't care. And we'll just explicitly call it out for good practice. And then just get rid of all this shit. Alright, so that'll keep that from starting multiple times, hopefully. And the next problem is that we need to actually create some animals. So, over here on our VB side, in our load form, we're going to say sim.newAnimal, new cat. And we're going to say the name is actually in VB we have to do this with name is Joe. And we'll create a couple of them. We'll create 2 cats, 2 dogs. With name, we'll say Joe, Bob, Larry, and Cecil. That should work. Let's see what happens now. Now let's start. And when I hit start here, as you can see, we have our simulator running in the background on a different thread. And if I hit stop, not only does it stop, but you can actually see that the thread exited in our output window here. So I'm going to go ahead and start it again, which, due to our updated code, should create a new thread and start it. And you can see that we just pick up where we left off, just like SimCity. And I hit stop, another thread exits, and everything is hunky-dory. And if I close the program, actually, if I close the form, nothing actually happens because there's still a thread running in the background. All I've done is started the process of closing the form, but the form will never completely be removed from memory because it owns a thread that is still running, and I'm going to have to kill the program manually here. So one thing that we can do here is on our form closing event, we can say simulator.stop. And now, if we close the form while our simulator is running, it should stop, and then that thread should exit, which triggers the entire application to gracefully shut down. And this is the way that you should be shutting down an application. There are ways to forcefully exit, but that obviously means that, your thread is going to be aborted mid-thread, and, if you have an application that actually saves data or saves its state, then that's a big problem. So the next thing that I want to do is actually fix the list view, because if you notice here, when we do this, this is no better than the console. We're clearing and rewriting this list view contents every 50 milliseconds, so I can't even click on one of these to do an action with it, which is not, not correct, not helpful. So let's go ahead and rewrite this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to refactor this into a new function, because this should probably be someplace else. So you can easily say extract method, and I'm going to call it update animal view. I'm sorry, let's try that again. I hit fucking escape instead of what I was supposed to do, which is enter, update animal view. There we go. And what we can do within here is, honestly, let's change the code up a bit. So the first problem is that our update simulator, our animal simulator, is never updating its customers, just like how originally the cats were not updating what is now the animal simulator when the animals died and were spawned. The animal simulator is now no longer updating its customer, which is the user interface when things spawn or die. So maybe what we should be doing here is creating an event that is raised when an animal is added or removed from the simulator. So let's go ahead and create a delegate for that, and we'll call it animal change. And animal change sends a animal simulator as the sender, and a animal as the changed animal, and returns nothing. And then we can have some events based on this. Animal change, animal added, animal change, animal removed. And now what we can do is within our code here, whenever we add an animal, for example here, we can now call if animal added is not null, then animal added A. And likewise, when an animal, we have to do the sender, so this A. And then likewise, when we detect that an animal has died, we can say if animal removed is not null, then animal removed this and the sender. And now, what we can do is within our application here, we can actually subscribe to these events. So I'm actually going to put with events right next to the simulator here. And now we can pick the simulator, and we have our animal added and our animal removed event. And now what I can do is I can say in the animal added event, here's where I can add the item, and our animal removed event is where we can remove the item. And in our update animal view, all we have to do is just loop through the animals we're aware of and update their state. So let's go ahead and do that. So within our animal added, let's create a new list item. As a new list view item. And we will say I.text equals, for now we're just going to say change.toString, because remember change is the animal that's being added. And then I'm going to add it to the list view, so animal view .items.add I, and that's going to add it to our view. And then likewise on animal removed, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say I.tag. Tag is a arbitrary object variable property, read-write property that's on the list view item that I can set to anything I want. And it basically just provides a reference to something in the business logic. And I'm going to actually set it to the animal itself. So that not only do I have a list view item representing the animal, it actually has a reference to the animal, so that when I go back and enumerate them later to update them, I know what animal I'm updating. And likewise, when we do animal removed, this makes it a lot easier because I can simply loop through my items. I'm sorry, we're in VB, so for each I as list view item in animal view.items. If I.tag is the one that's being removed, then we can basically just say, go ahead and remove that from the list. If we don't see it in the list, then it's not already in the list, and we don't have to remove it further. And then likewise, when we go through and we update our animal view, we want to loop through all of the items in the view, and then what we want to do is we want to get a reference to the animal that they're associated with. So I can say dim a as animal, which is declaring a local animal in VB. And in here I'm going to say try-cast I.tag to an animal. And perhaps I'll do this if I.tag is not nothing. Basically saying if I.tag isn't null, then try to turn it into an animal. And if you can, if a is not nothing, then we now have the animal that's associated with this list view item, and we can say I.text equals a.toString true, which is the, and also true up here because we want the statistics for now, for that. And now if we go ahead and run this, we may get an exception right away once we start this. Actually notice that we already, because of the way that it works, we've already have an update with the initial items that were created, because when we created the items in our form load header handler, creating the animals through a new animal immediately called the event handler back on our form, which loads these. Now that's okay because that's all on the thread that the form is running on. When I hit start though, let's see here. I think we're good because the tick that's coming from the timer is actually, oh, no, there we go. So what actually happened is we have a cross-thread operation, and the way that it works is that there's a thread that actually manages the form UI, and that is the only thread that can make changes to the form UI. And because of that, while the updating is happening perfectly fine, because that's being driven by the timer that's on the form, when we add an item on its own merit, and that item is being added, that animal is being added by the simulator on the simulator thread, we have an issue here, because we're making changes to the form from a thread that is not the form. This handler was called perfectly fine when we were calling it based on something the form was doing, creating the initial 4 animals, but this handler now is being called as a result of the animal simulator adding animals itself on another thread, and that can't happen. You can see here I have a cross-thread operation, and that's not valid. So how the hell do we deal with this? Well, it's very easy to deal with this, actually. Basically, what we do is we create a thread-safe operation here, and what we want to do is we want to create some type of message passing here so that these threads can synchronize without having to worry about, how this is occurring, without... So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a object, a list called private new animals as list of animal. And what I'm actually going to do is within my event handler, I'm going to add new animals.add change, and then I'm going to do what's called invoke. I'm going to invoke a function that I've yet to write called add stub. And here I'm going to create that. And what that is going to allow me to do, what is the problem here? Yeah, I gotta create a delegate, I'm sorry. Let's create a delegate, private delegate stub, sub-stub, sorry. And we'll create a new stub with a pointer to that function. Sorry about that. And then we can put that logic in here. Except that at this point, we are now going through the new animals. So now what I want to do is I want to sync lock the animals, the new animals, and then go through them. And then for each of those, we want to add them to the list. Move that in here. And then clear the new animals. So I know this is rather bizarre. This is a rather roundabout way of doing it, but let me explain what's actually happening here. So what's happening is that when we get notified that an animal has to be added, we're adding it to this new animals list, and we're doing it within a lock. So that basically what's happening is we're saying, okay, well, when we enter the statement, me and only me is touching this new animals, and then we end the statement. And then we invoke this stub over here, and what this does is this causes it to be invoked on the actual form. I'm actually running me.invoke, or this.invoke. I'm calling invoke on the actual form itself, the instance of the window that we have, which causes this function to be run on the form's thread when the form next has events to fire. It puts it in a queue. Now, the reason why we have to have a list of new animals is because it's very possible that this event runs multiple times before this actually gets around to being called, because this is actually going to be called on the event loop, which means that this is really just being queued up to be called once the form is done doing whatever it's doing, updating its UI elements, polling for input, whatever the hell it has to do. So that's why we actually have to have new animals here. If I just made a variable that held one animal, it's very possible that would actually get overridden faster than this could be called to dispatch it. So now because we have a sync lock around this, it means that this thread will actually wait if some other thread is accessing new animals, so that we can actually coordinate and what's called synchronize the threads. Basically make sure that they're not touching the same thing at the same time, so that this thing runs, puts it there, and then this thing picks it back up as if it's a dead drop, as if this is a spy and this is another spy, and they're dropping information off to be picked up secretly, asynchronously. So here within our sync lock, we pick up all of the new animals that have been dispatched to us, we add them to the list view, and then we clear the new animals, and then we release our lock. And unfortunately, we're going to have to do the same thing with removed animals, so let's go ahead and just do that before we bother running this. Removed animals. Might not necessarily be because they're dead, just be because they're removed. And then we can do the same thing here. We can basically take this data and replace it with a sync lock to removed animals.add change, and then an invoke of a new stub of remove stub, and that will be a function that we'll create right here, a sub, which is a void, which is a function that returns no return value. And then within here, we will sync lock the removed animals, enumerate through them. And then within that, our original business logic. And now if we run it, let's try it again. And we immediately have an issue, because this is not set to anything, because I did not create new instances of these things. My bad. Alright, and we'll start them, and then we'll see what happens when these finally start spawning new offspring. And hey, what do you know? We have new offspring that are updating, and you'll notice that I can actually click on the list view item, and obviously if it disappears while it's being selected, it disappears, but I can actually select this, and the item itself is being updated. We are no longer clearing the list and making new items every attempt. So, and if we stop it, we can stop it. I can select the item, we can start it. This is actually, the reason why it disappears when I click stop is because I need to set a thing called hide selection, needs to be turned off. And now it will remain. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the UI a little bit to show you how powerful this is. Let's change this into a details list, and let's create some column headers. And we'll call them name, and we'll call them life, we'll call it generation, and we'll call it type. And maybe type will be first. And maybe age as well. Alright, so let's make sure we got these down pat. We have type, name, generation, and age. So now what we're going to do is within our update, our add here, we're going to say when we add this, not only are we going to add that, we're also going to add, alright, what were they again? Type, name, life, generation, age. 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 Alright, so the first one is the type, so we're going to set the text to the type. So we're going to say a.getType.name. The second one we're going to do subitems.add is going to be the name, so we're going to do a.name. Then the life, so we're going to subitems add a.life, and that's an integer, so we have to string. And then notice how in VB I don't have to put the double parentheses after a function name, it's so great. Life generation, I don't know that we made that public, so we're going to have to make a property for that. And let's say we add age, like so. And now we will have to fix generation in a second, but we also have to update this on our update animal view. So this is now, what I meant to do was copy that comment. And when we update our animals, instead of using the statistics generator, we will say a.getType.name, i.subitems1. This is going to be interesting to remember. I think they start at 1 on the left, and 2 is the first one that needs to actually be changed, but I could be completely wrong. We'll see. 3.text is life, and 4 is the non-existent generation, and 5 will be the age. Alright. Now, let's see if this, I'm going to comment that, well, I can't because, okay, let's fix that first. So we go back into here, and where we have generation, we will say that is private, but we now have a public int generation get return generation, and it is read-only because no one needs to set the generation. And now back in our VB code, this should be valid now, which it is. Let's run it. And when we start, oh shit, 5 is not valid, but yeah, I fucked up. I know I did. There we go. Alright, so you can see here we have generation 0, cats, dogs living together, Joe, Bob, Larry, and Cecil. And they basically just spawn in. And this is our user interface. And likewise before, the selection stays, and because we changed hide selection, it's, well, it turns to gray, but it's still there. I do want to turn on whole line selection, I believe. What's it called? Line, entire line, select entire line. What is it? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Border style, da-da-da-da-da. Full row select, true. There we go. That will make that look a little bit better. There we go, that's what we want. And there you go. And we can do a couple other nice little touches. So for example, let's add a label down here. And let's say total animals. And we'll put another label next to it. And we'll set that to 0 by default, and we'll call that total label. And in our tick update, which is here, update animal view, at the bottom of that we'll say total label dot text equals sim.animals.count.toString. And you can see here. Now the interesting thing is that that did not update until we ran the timer. So maybe one thing that we do is we run update animal view within the add stub and delete stub, but within the sync lock, so that now the total animals has been updated to reflect that, even if the timer isn't running. So that's very helpful. And now let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's add a list box. Not a list view, a list box. And I just want to put a little summary over here that breaks down the number of animals by type. And keep in mind, there could be any number of different types, so this won't be anything that we can do statically. We're going to have to dynamically compute how many of each animal there are, and we're just going to say summary list is the name of this. And what we're going to basically do is, on our update animal view, right about here, we'll say compute summary. And maybe that shouldn't be public. I'll make it friend. And what we can do here is we'll say summary list.items.clear. And now we're going to use something called LINQ. LINQ is called language integrated query. So I'll make a comment here. LINQ is language integrated query. And what I want to do is I want to create a variable here. We'll call it the summary. And what I want to do is say, from A is animal, in the animals in the simulator, I want to group by a.getType.name. I want to group by the type of the animal. Let's make some more space here. Into a group. And what that actually allows me to do now is if I enumerate over this for each, let's just say X in the summary, I now have something that has the name and a group of all the animals that have that. And name is the type here, so we can actually redefine this and call it animal type. And now if I look at X, X has the animal type and the number of animals that match that type. So I can literally say type name is x.animalType, and type count is x.group.count. And now we can add an item. Summary list.items.add, and we can say type name, type count to string. And let's go ahead and run this. And you can see here we have 2 cats and we have 2 dogs, and when we run this, as they spawn, these will automatically update. And there's an annoying dog that just rolled in. And just wait long enough, and as these die and they disappear, so do the types. And we can do all types of things here. We can create where statements. I could say where group.count is greater than a certain number. I could say up here, before the group, I could say where a.life is greater than a certain number. If I want to select something different, I could, here's a good example. Let's say I don't want to do this concatenation down here. Let's just say I want to select animal type plus group.count.toString. And now, I don't even have to worry about any of this. This is literally nothing more than a list of strings. And in fact, as you look here, it's actually an IEnumerable of string. And I can even turn it into a string array by setting it to summary.toArray. And now this is just a normal string array, an array of strings. And it's the same exact function. Oh shit, no it's not. That's because that is not X. There we go. And there you go, cat and dog. Cats, dogs living together in list boxes, list views, text boxes. How dare we? So there you go. And that is how that works. On the next episode, we're going to go into pluggability and dynamically loading types from other libraries and all sorts of things like attributes, interfaces, and structures.